This video deals with the problems of competitive rivalry. I want to do a deeper dive into rivalry than for some of the other topics because it's really both kind of confusing sometimes when we do these analyses and because it's really important for profitability down the road. So the first thing to emphasize for students is that not all firms and industries experience intensive rivalry. It just doesn't always happen. So if you were to look at, say, pizza chains, Domino's, Papa John's, Little Caesars, rivalry is really intense. The products are very similar. They compete a lot on price. They try and attack each other with branding. They do a lot of specials. They really go after each other really hard all the time, on price especially, which is probably the worst possible way to compete. But if we look at another industry like pharmaceuticals, rivalry is a lot less intense. They don't really compete on price because they aren't really dealing with the same customers or selling the same products most of the time. So big companies like Pfizer and Merck, there's less rivalry. And then for companies like Dr. Reddy's Labs or other generics, Teva, generics producers, customers aren't terribly price sensitive, so firms tend not to compete on price. But when we get down to company analysis and we start to look at rivalry between pairs of firms, which inflates up to the industry level, then this is the framework that Hit Ireland and Hoskisson use, which comes from research by Mingju Chen from Columbia University. So we're really interested in the three boxes on the left-hand side of this picture: competitive analysis, drivers of competitive behavior, and the inter-firm rivalry boxes, blue, orange, and purple. And I should point out, I have to point out, since I'm a professor and these things bother me, is that the drivers of competitive behavior really should moderate the relationship between competitive analysis and inter-firm rivalry, actual rivalry. So let's go on to the next slide and talk about when firms are motivated to attack each other. This is the basic idea. Firms that are more alike tend to be more rivalrous. So there's two dimensions to this figure: market commonality and resource similarity. Market commonality is exactly what it sounds like. Firms compete in the same markets for the same customer with very similar offerings, or they don't. They might be in sort of the same markets and with sort of the same products. And then the other side, resource similarity, is that firms have different kinds of resource bases, and the more similar they are, the more aggressively they compete. So if you think about mass market pizza chains, they're up in the yellow quadrant, number one, where market commonality is high. They're all national, and the resource similarity, drivers, limited menu, fast delivery, the whole strategy is very similar. And as a consequence, rivalry is really high, whereas the pharmaceutical example I used, market commonality is actually pretty low between most firms. They don't make the same drugs, and they do things in fairly different ways. So a company that does drug discovery has a different resource base that's heavy on R&D and intellectual property compared to a generics firm, which is really concerned with manufacturing costs and locating manufacturing in low-cost places and things like that. So let me try a couple of other examples. Ford and BMW, they're both auto manufacturers, but they aren't really rivals because they're not in the same markets. BMW tends to be at a much higher price point than Ford, with very different sort of heavy engineering capabilities and so on. It's a different set of markets and resources. Or maybe one that would be a little closer would be Honda and Toyota. We talked about Honda earlier when we talked about its capabilities for doing engines. So Toyota is a giant car company. It does almost nothing else. It's in every automotive market, in every segment around the world. Honda's also global, but it depends much less on automobiles. It's a motor company, an engine company. So it has all these segments that it doesn't compete with Toyota in, snow blowers and things like that, other things, generators, things like that. They're actually quite important to it. So market commonality is actually lower, and resource similarities actually not all that the same. They're really different companies in terms of their resource bases. So when firms have high commonality and high similarity, they tend to be more aggressive in competing with each other. And when the second most would be 2, the pale blue circle there, where we have high market commonality and low resource similarity. This can actually be a really aggressive situation for rivalry because the firms don't understand each other, right? They don't understand what the other firm is doing. In category 1 here, high, they understand each other. They know what they're doing, and it might actually become kind of gentlemanly in terms of competition. So these things drive awareness and to some extent motivation, right? So awareness tends to go up as they become more alike, and then motivation comes up as market commonality increases. Ability, the last piece of this picture, is that firms can't always just compete. The ability to respond to competitive moves or to be aggressive on things like price or branding depends on what your other competitors are doing. How the firm is performing. A firm that's performing poorly, maybe because it's being competed with heavily, often can't respond. And then there might be other demands on resources. So a firm that's really, really dependent on R&D might choose to compete by entering new markets and trying to escape its competitors rather than responding competitively to current markets. So that's the video for this week, and